quantify those things and just say we're not getting ahead with that $1 that comes in because it's costing somehow society and the communities $3. So I think that's a lie to think that we're ever going to get out of that. And, I think it was Einstein that said the height of idiocy is to do the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Yeah, if you spend any time at all in Atlantic City, you can see that the casinos have not been some wonderful boon for that town at all.
Vegas for ugly people.
Yeah, basically. Years ago it was a seaside town in decline, and the casinos were supposed to turn the town around. And what it did was it created this, visually glitzy boardwalk, and the rest of the town fell apart.
Yeah. Well, I'll even go further than that. Every single urban area in this country that has experienced the ills of casino gambling has gone into a precipitous financial decline directly as a result. And let me use Rhode Island as a specific example. The notion that somehow Rhode Island gambling is going to save Rhode Island government is based in fantasy. One of the reasons we're in the condition we're in right now is because of casino gambling. It is nothing more than a regressive tax on the poor and uneducated, and lies largely in terms of revenue collection on the citizenry that it's allegedly supporting.
Right.
Most of the money comes from here.
Right.
What the analogy that I like to draw to people, if someone handed you an increase of $1,000 in your property tax, you'd probably be a little tweaked, wouldn't you, Tony? Well, does playing a really cool video game and then handing him $1,000 make any difference?
And by the way, a little anecdote from my personal life, and in full disclosure, it was recently my girlfriend's birthday, and she wanted to go to Newport for her birthday, so we did stop by Newport Grand. But anytime I go to Newport Grand or Foxwoods or Twin River, I see a guy from my day job who earlier that week told me, man, times are tough, he's broke, and he's at the casino throwing 20s in.
Right. And are these those video slots that he's throwing 20s in?
Video crack, yeah.
They're absolutely the worst. And, I see this new Newport initiative as a way of trying to dress up a pig. They're trying to legitimize, in some ways, a fairly ugly business. But, this whole idea that we're going to be another Monaco. There is only one Monaco.
Well, and it isn't on Mineral Spring Avenue?
No, it's not.
Okay.
And it's not right over the bridge to Newport. And
well, there's a professor at MIT, a woman by the name of Natasha Schull, has got, I think, a very compelling statement. According to her, these machines are designed to get every user to play to extinction. Now think about that.
Oh, yeah.
In the terms of playing to extinction, what she means is all their money is gone. All right? And she describes the technology as using a high-tech version of loaded dice. Your comments, sir?
I'm still thinking about the previous comment about the glitz, and both of you have mentioned Monaco. Full disclosure, I've been to the Monte Carlo Casino in Monaco more than once, and it's a beautiful building, classic, great location overlooking the Riviera, not that far from the palace of the prince. Beautiful access to the 3 roads, the corniches that lead into it. And so when I hear the proponent of this talking about a Monte Carlo style casino, I'm reminded of the debate a few years ago, the vice presidential debate between Dan Quayle and Lloyd Bentsen. And Quayle spoke about how he had worked with John F. Kennedy, and he had as much experience from the Senate as his opponent had. And so Lloyd Bentsen said to him, I knew Jack Kennedy. I worked with Jack Kennedy. And you, Senator, are no Jack Kennedy. Mm-hmm. I want to say that about the casino that's proposed. No matter how you dress that up, it is no Monte Carlo. It never will be.
No.
Even if they ever try to fulfill their promises, it still is never going to be Monte Carlo. I'm surprised that Monte Carlo hasn't sued us for using that kind of language.
If they hear about it, maybe they will. But I would bet that Monte Carlo doesn't rely heavily on video slots.
No.
The experience there, the gambling experience, is very high stakes. It goes for a particular type of clientele. The locals can't afford to set foot in there because there isn't the equivalent of the dollar slots for them to throw all their money away in.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Newport specifically then. A hodgepodge of concerns have been thrown out there. But first talk about the history. Now, initially, this was supposed to be Hialeah, and Hialeah only. Isn't the trademark of Newport gambling a war of attrition?
Yes, and I think it's important to remember the only thing Newport has ever voted in favor of in this regard is the introduction of the sport of Hialeah. And everything else, the slots, have happened, by legislation from the State House. So it's not that the Newporters have had, when they have had a chance, they voted against things. Like 2 years ago, and this is what really bothers us, that 2 years ago, a very heavily vetted campaign was launched on both sides. We had debates. I myself appeared with the presidents of both Newport Grand and Twin River in a public forum, and we talked to all people, knew what was happening, and Newporters voted against it, as you mentioned before, by a large margin. And now, 2 years later, they come back. So is it like saying that vote didn't count? We think it did, and we think it should count.
And that's a pretty large mandate when you think that Twin River had let me put my pinky up when I say this, $1 million spent in this state, and yet Newport still voted it down. They spent $1 million on promotion. None of it on any of the shows that we produce, P.O., unfortunately. But
in which case, we might be willing to change it. but
put a slot machine right in the studio.
That's right.
But what's insidious about this campaign is, like I said earlier, they seem to be following what I call Twin Rivers 101. The discussion this time, and it this wonderful tourist haven, if you will, organically, by doing the right thing, by responding to consumer needs like restaurants, by providing top-of-the-line inns and hotels. All that becomes endangered by this, doesn't it?
It sure does. And, Senate President Teresa Paiva-Weed, a couple of years ago, when she stepped down for a moment to speak out against a casino at that time, she said some very, very serious things, and we wonder what made her change her mind. At that time, she said to the Senate, "You're voting against all the things you're voting if you vote for having the casino go on the ballot." She said, "You're voting against all the things that so many people have worked so hard on building. A knowledge economy, trying to show this state as something special, something where young innovators will come and build their businesses, grow their businesses." And she spoke passionately. It's on our website also. She spoke passionately against the casino a couple of years ago. And now, all of a sudden, it comes back. We don't understand that. What's the change?
And in an effort to compete, once this tumor is dropped onto Newport, then there's the potential for some of the larger hotel properties then to have to respond in kind in order to stay competitive, correct?
Could happen. You could have, you take what's going on in Las Vegas. They have these slot parlors all over the place, with one employee, just manning the place. So that, the creep can always happen it's like special legislation. If this casino referendum passes, it's special legislation for one business, namely Newport Grand. Now, that seems to me to be an unfair situation. What about what other businesses are we going to give a monopoly to and say, you can be the only one here? I just think that there's things that we're not thinking out that could fall out from
exactly
all of this.
Unintended consequences.
Yes.
Now, look back, a few years ago when Providence was considering casino gambling. What was fascinating to me is that you had this whole quilt of organizations, people like PPAC, Rhode Island, the Providence Restaurant Association, all of them unanimously opposed to this because of the competitive pressures it would represent. One of the more compelling parts of your website is that you have live recordings of people's testimony before the Newport City Council. It's very, very effective because we tend to forget that these are real people with real businesses, real lives, real careers, a lifetime, generations of investment in a community. And ultimately, who is the community to be developed for? Is it some outside firm like Mr. Paolino who just wants to plop this atrocity down right in the middle of Newport? Or Is it for the people who live there? Who are we supposed to be developing for? I would argue that the citizenry of Newport deserves its own right of self-determination, not to have to respond every 2 to 3 years to the developer du jour, Monaco on Mineral Spring, whatever you want to call it. They just deserve better than that. What was especially compelling was a gentleman from Roomful of Blues, spoke.
Mike Warner.
Exactly, very eloquently. And he talked about what happened to the Warwick musical tent. Maybe share that with us for a second.
Well, that's close to home. As a kid, I went to practically everything the musical theater had, and then it disappeared shortly after Foxwood opens, because the Foxwoods could get larger crowds for the entertainers, and the entertainers weren't going to come to the Warwick Musical Theater for a small crowd. So they put them out of business. It was a wonderful thing in Rhode Island, put them out of business. And I think that will happen with we're concerned about other things, Trinity, PPAC, Second Story Theater, the GAM Theater, Ocean State Theater.
Newport, Jane Pickens has been building up. There's been a restoration project at the Opera House.
Yes.
Will that be in danger with something like this?
I think all kinds of entertainment places will be in danger, because the proponents of the legislation, those who want to buy it, of Newport Grand, they've talked about more entertainment going on. They talked about bringing in bigger shows and that sort of thing.
And then it becomes like in the other casino towns, an island that nobody gets off of.
Exactly, keeps them walled in. And that's the goal. That's the goal.
The tragic part of this is, if you were to look at in the aggregate, the billions of dollars that's been poured into gambling in this state, if a fraction of that had been poured into the local economy, what the results would be. Yeah. Instead of the $1,000 being wasted at the casino and then, going into the rat hole that is Rhode Island government, or going out to outside management companies outside of the state, let's just say $600 of that has been spent on local contractors, a guy on the local painter, someone doing a little bit more for their kitchen, maybe sending their kids to parochial school. Any one of 1,000 things that people can find a way to spend money onto that actually invests in the community, where you've got the effect of money being passed between legitimate businesses who are members of the community to each other. Think of the economy that would have existed if it wasn't for the black hole of gambling. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and we want, like I said, we're going to be intimately attached to this issue. Tell us, if you will, what the average Rhode Islander can do, and just tell us, too, a little bit about the personal impact of gambling on people's lives.
Well, I think what Rhode Islanders can do is look at the webpage. Thank you for the nice support you give to our webpage. Our Chip Leakus is doing a wonderful job for us, and you can learn a lot there. Now, if Rhode Islanders got used to that, rather than just hearing jobs, and Monte Carlo style and those kinds of slogans, if they really saw what was happening and the damage that it's doing to people, the people who, as I say, we had fraud, all those kinds of things. I would say, almost every Rhode Islander knows somebody who has suffered drastically from problem gambling, whether it's loss of their home or whatever it is. I would think every Rhode Islander has somebody, whether it's a relative or a friend or a co-worker, but we don't talk enough about that, because it's under the radar. If someone comes into work having had too much alcohol, or drugs of some sort, we notice it, but you don't notice the compulsive gambler. He or she is, looks the same.
Wow. Well, thank you for coming in tonight. And,
thank you. It's a pleasure.
Like I said, we hope to be at some level a resource for you folks.
That'd be great.
And we wish you all the best.
Good. Thank you for having us.
Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of The Coalition. Don't forget to check out coalitionradio.us on Facebook, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, and on Twitter at @Coalition_radio. Until next time, for P.O. and Chris, my name is Tony Jones. You are tuned in to AM 790, your station for talk and business.